and welcome to the 2019 National Tornado Summit and Disaster Symposium. Please welcome the co-chair of the National Tornado Summit from Farmers Insurance, Kim Decker.
Good morning. Okay, that was a little vapid, but it's okay. Drink your coffee. We're all here this morning. Good morning, and welcome to the 8th Annual National Tornado Summit. We are very excited to join insurance professionals, regulators, emergency managers, meteorologists, as well as international, national, and state experts to share ideas and recommend new policies to improve the way disasters are handled. Are you all excited to be here? Okay, come on. We have 2 days ahead of us that are full of valuable education and networking as we focus together on improving disaster mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery so that we can save property and, most importantly, save lives across this country. So questions about continuing education credits should be directed to the tent that is across from the registration desk downstairs. You must be scanned in at the beginning of each general session and breakout session. And we'll say that a lot, but it's important. To receive continuing education, you must also stay through the entire session. And lots of rules. In order to receive the 10 hours of general credit, you must attend the entire conference and all the sessions. If you skip a session, you will not receive any credit. So we have strict rules with our regulators and our CE, so please abide by those rules for us and get that credit. It takes a great deal of time and dedication to put a summit like this together. The task force has worked tirelessly to make the summit a success, and I am so very thankful for their commitment. So would the National Tornado Summit Task Force please stand and be recognized? Everybody who's helped us, please stand. Some of you are not standing yet. Come on. I think some of them are in the back working too. Also, please make sure to take time throughout the summit to visit with the expo sponsored by Farmers Insurance. It is located on this second floor just outside in the hallways, and that is also where breakfast and your breaks will be served. So an important spot. You will find an exhibitor card in your badge holder that I'm not wearing. And it's in the back in the little zipper compartment. That's where you get your exhibitor card signed. You also will find your program back there. So if you're wondering where your program is, that's where it is. Please, on that exhibitor card, make sure you get initials from at least 40 exhibitors, and you will be in a drawing for a $100 Visa gift card. You can turn in those completed forms, exhibitor forms, to the Farmers Insurance booth, which is just outside the main doors here. So let's stop for just a moment and give all of our exhibitors a round of applause. All right, and I was talking about social media this morning, very important part of this, so let's get the National Tornado Summit trending on social media. Please join in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag NTS2019, so hashtag NTS2019. Get out there and tweet something. And if you haven't done so already, we also want you to download the Summit app. You can get it from iTunes or Google Play. Just search for 2019 National Tornado Summit. And please make sure that you enable push notifications because you'll receive important updates and access to special offers if you do. We also encourage you to share your time here through our photo contest to win one of our great prizes. So you just have to take a photo that shows your unique NTS experience and share it on Twitter, again, with the hashtag NTS2019. Add a title and a caption explaining the photo. You may enter as many unique photos as you want. All entries must be submitted by March 6th, that's Wednesday, at 9:59 a.m., and we'll announce the winner at the closing session. Also, during each general session, we'll be interacting with the audience and speakers through Slido. This is new, so if you've been here before, pay attention. Inside your program are your instructions to access the polls. So everybody get out your mobile devices. We don't often ask you to do that when make sure the ringer's turned off, but get out your mobile devices and get prepared to participate. It's very simple. All you want to do is go to www.sli.do, so www.sli.do, and enter event code NTS2019, and click join. And then you can ask questions of our speakers. You can also see what questions have been asked, and if you like them, they'll continue to rise to the top. So you can survey the best questions. If you want to see the answer to a question, then like it, and it'll go up to the top of the list. And we'll try, if time permits, to get as many questions in as we can. So that's your opportunity to participate. Don't miss out. All right, next, I'd like to take just a moment to recognize all of the summit hosts. So thank you to our hosts and partners, University of Central Oklahoma, National Weather Center, Oklahoma Insurance Department, Oklahoma Emergency Management, National Association of Insurance Commissioners, Storm Prediction Center, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Also, thank you to our summit sponsors. They're all listed in your program, and we'll recognize them throughout the summit. So please, please, please be sure to thank them for their support and generosity. That helps underwrite our summit activities, and without them, we wouldn't be here. So let's start with this morning's breakfast sponsor, Guggenheim Insurance. Thank you to Guggenheim Insurance for sponsoring our breakfast this morning. All right, on to the program. Joining us today is the 13th Commissioner of the Oklahoma Insurance Department. He is a recognized leader and champion in the insurance industry. Starting as a broker in 1984, he rose to serve at the executive level of the two largest health insurance companies in Oklahoma. In 2007, he joined Benefit Plan Strategies, a company helping businesses provide employee benefits and health insurance to their employees. He has served as president of both the Tulsa and the Oklahoma State Health Underwriters Association and has been named State Health Underwriter of the Year. In 2010, he successfully ran for state representative and quickly became the point person for the House of Representatives on insurance issues, and was appointed chairman of the Insurance Committee after the 2014 elections, and then became majority floor leader in 2017. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Glenn Mulready.
Thank you, Kim. It's a really nice bio introduction, but unfortunately my wife is sitting right here, so if you want to know the truth, you can talk to her about who Glenn Mulready is. And with that, let me introduce my wife. This is my first Tornado Summit as commissioner, and so my wife, Sally Mulready. And I also might take a minute to recognize some of our major sponsors. So thank you to Farmers, Oklahoma Farm Bureau, Johnson Lambert, Liberty Mutual, Walmart. We couldn't do this without our sponsors, so thank you to them. And also, where's Adrian's right here in front? I want to just recognize Adrian works for the Oklahoma Insurance Department, pulls all of this together, all the details, does an excellent job. And so, round of applause for Adrian and her group. So, and our communications person is here, and they will probably learn, instead of when I get up on a script and it just says Mulready remarks and it's blank and just let me go, that's probably not a good idea, right? Actually, I don't know if we have in the room too, but I might just recognize we have at least two insurance commissioners from the state of New Mexico, Commissioner Franchini, and then from Arkansas, Commissioner Alan Kerr. If they're in the room, you might stand and wave. Can't see out there, but be looking for them. We've got a full agenda for you the next day and a half. We're excited. Adrian, as I said, was in charge of all the details. She put me in charge of the weather, so sorry. This is not normal Oklahoma weather at all. But matter of fact, it was a week or so ago when we were looking at this forecast, and I asked our team, now we do have event insurance, right? Someone paid the premium on that event insurance in case we have to cancel out, but luckily it's just cold. So thank you for being here and making the trek over here. You'll have tracks that you can go on in the next day and a half. I know you know that, but disaster preparedness, emergency management. My hope is that you come to Oklahoma City and you go back to your businesses, back to your states. We've got a number of regulators here from all over the country, from Utah, South Dakota, Louisiana, and you bring back to your states takeaways that will help you in those areas. I'm just thrilled to sort of be on the tails of something that our next speaker initiated, and so with that, Commissioner Doak 8 years ago took office, and I was friends with John previous to him being elected, but it was his idea, and he conceptualized that and brought this together, and so consistently For the last 8 years, we've had about this size crowd pulling together for ideas and being prepared, bringing folks into Oklahoma City to see and learn about Oklahoma City as well. So I'm just thrilled for what he has pulled together, and I'm glad to be on his coattails. So it's my pleasure today to introduce my predecessor at the Oklahoma Insurance Department and the person who did conceptualize this summit. Please welcome former Commissioner John Doak.
How's everybody? Now, how many of you all have been here before? Raise your hand. Outstanding. Now, how many of it is it your first time? Raise your hand. Great. Well, you will love spending time in downtown Oklahoma City and getting to know the people down here. They're very, very friendly, and I'm sure that they would love to have you spend a few dollars in the local, we won't say pubs and establishment, we'll say retail outlets, right? So enjoy that. Well, Glenn, thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's hard to see up here, but I know that you're right there somewhere. But I have to tell you that I am so excited about Glenn Mulready being Oklahoma's new insurance commissioner. He ran a great race. He's got the knowledge. He's got the expertise. We had the opportunity to spend a lot of time together, but we even went and toured one of our disasters that happened up near the Oklahoma-Arkansas border earlier in December, and we had a chance to talk about disasters. And I just want to tell you that his heart is for helping the people of Oklahoma and continuing to help the people around the country with some of the things that we've learned from here. Our hearts go out to Commissioner Ridling from Alabama, has attended this event several times, and it would be remiss if we didn't stop just for a brief moment and say a prayer for the folks from Alabama. So if you'll bow your heads real quick, I'd like to just pray for those folks that lost loved ones. There was 26 that perished. And that's the reason why we're here. So if you would just bow your heads for just a minute. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you that, Lord, that you are with the people of Alabama, those folks that have lost loved ones at a very, very tragic time. Lord, we just ask that you wrap your arms around them and give them all the resources, help, and assistance that they need. And Father, that's why we're here for this type of conference, is to learn to do more and share with others so we can prevent the damage and the loss of life. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. So one of the things I just wanted to say is the folks from the Oklahoma Insurance Department have done a great job putting this together over the last few years. Adrian, thank you so much. And we started this in 2012, and Andy Beal is here from the NAIC, who's become a great friend and really helped shape some of this behind the scenes. But being out on the forefront of what you all do every day, from emergency management to your insurance professions, helping Americans, helping Oklahomans prepare for disasters, it's so critical. I have a position now on the FEMA National Advisory Council, where I'm able to put a little bit of input from what we learn here into the national stage, and it's something that's been very meaningful to me. So when I think about this conference and think about some of the things that we've been able to do since 2012 and wherever the future goes with the conference, I think that we've done a great job here. I remember bringing families up here the first time in 2012 that had lost everything. And they've had a great experience coming through, understanding the insurance, working with adjusters, putting their lives back together. And we've had so many innovations that have happened since 2012 with payments, the transition of payments, not giving consumers checks, but now giving them credit cards where they can go straight to the Walmart, one of our sponsors, or they can go to the hotels. They can get their lives put back together in an easier fashion than getting a check. One of the biggest issues that we found that solved was if you give someone a large check that's never had a large amount of money given to them before, then the banks would put a 7-day hold on that large check. So we figured out a way to kind of correct that with some of the insurers, and I'm very happy about that. So we've learned a great deal of ways to connect with consumers and also bring the health insurers into the spectrum relative to disasters. Because if you've lost everything, you don't have medications. There are folks out there with disabilities, with all kinds of seniors that have all kinds of issues. If you've lost your home, you need your health insurance. You need to get a resupply of those prescription drugs that you may have lost. or may be gone. So all facets of this has been something that we've been very proud of. So Glenn, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes to just come say hello. But I just want to tell you, I'm so proud of you and Sally for what you're doing at the department. And you've got my full support and the role that you're going to play at the NAIC, because Oklahoma plays a big part in that. And thank you to my colleagues, my good friend Johnny Franchini from New Mexico over here. Johnny, thank you so much for always being a supporter. I know Alan Kerr is out here from Arkansas, both states contiguous to Oklahoma, and we always work very, very well together. So Glenn, I'm not going to be able to stay around too much longer today, but thank you for the opportunity to come up here and say hello. Really appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. A quick fun story. He just mentioned Commissioner Franchini from New Mexico, and 2 days ago, so John has a son named Zach, played baseball at Tulsa Union High School. It's a good-sized school in Tulsa area. He's on a baseball scholarship to University of New Mexico. Plays for the Lobos, I think they're called. And so 2 days ago, he had his first opportunity to get into his first NCAA game. He steps up to the plate for his first at-bat. The very first pitch, 2-run home run. How's that for a start of a college career, huh? John tells me he taught him everything he knows about baseball. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Appreciate your past work and your support. So next up, I have the privilege to introduce the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Legal Officer of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and more importantly, a former Oklahoman, but please welcome Andy Beal.
Thank you, Commissioner Mulready. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you today for the opening session of the 2019 National Tornado Summit. And more importantly, it's great to be back in Oklahoma City. I'm a graduate of the Oklahoma City University Law School. My wife was born and raised here in Oklahoma City, so it's always good when I have the opportunity to come back and visit family and friends. You know, my congratulations to all those involved with putting together such an outstanding program. I know it takes a huge team to pull this off, but it's all about, you know, everyone coming together from different facets of the community to put together a solid program to benefit everybody here in attendance. So, job well done to everyone. I'd like to say just a few words about the NAIC and also why the NAIC has supported the National Tornado Summit over the past few years. You know, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners was formed way back in 1871 by state insurance commissioners, and the original mission was to develop financial reporting standards for insurance companies. Today, the NAIC serves as the standard-setting and regulatory support organization for all of the state insurance regulators across this great country. Through the NAIC, state insurance regulators establish standards and best practices, which brings me to why the NAIC is a proud participant in this National Tornado Summit. Preparing for and recovering from natural disasters, whether they be hurricanes, tornadoes, or severe flooding events, is an extremely important issue for the members of the NAIC. All of us have important roles to play when it comes to preparing for and recovering from natural disasters, whether it's federal, state, local government officials, emergency first responders, the meteorological and law enforcement professions, voluntary support organizations, and of course, the insurance industry. For example, state insurance regulators, again working through the NAIC, have devoted a great deal of time and energy in recent years educating the public, trying to help people to better understand about the risk and dangers of severe weather events and other natural disasters, the need to have inventories for all of their personal property, and the important role insurance plays in helping them recover and rebuild from such devastating events. Yes, I think we all know that insurance plays a large part in helping the economic recovery following catastrophic events. State insurance regulators are focused heavily on how policyholders can be better protected through insurance and mitigation steps, and how communities can become more resilient. So I thank you all for being here at this important program and allowing me a few minutes to say a few words. And I thank all of you for all of the help that you provide others in times of emergency. And I hope everyone has a successful program. Thank you.
Thank you all for being with us at the summit. So our first presenter this morning is a senior hurricane specialist and warning coordination meteorologist at NOAA's National Hurricane Center in Miami. He has served in various positions at NOAA, and his current role involves the issuance of track, intensity, and wind radii forecasts, as well as warnings for tropical cyclones in the Atlantic and eastern North Pacific Oceans. He coordinates NHC's outreach and training activities and works with FEMA's Emergency Management Institute to develop hurricane preparedness training courses for emergency managers. He has also assisted in the development of several tropical cyclone-related COMET training modules. He received a regional and national NWS Isaac Klein Award in 2017 for his work in bringing hurricane science and preparedness webinars to elementary schools across hurricane vulnerable areas of the United States. Very nice. Please welcome Daniel Brown.
I think I'm mic'd up as well, so see if I can move around a little bit. We're getting feedback. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here talking hurricanes at a tornado summit. It's pretty interesting. I will have to say that it was a bit warmer in Miami when I left yesterday morning. I won't tell you how warm it was on Sunday, but it was pretty nice. But at least I get a couple of days to enjoy winter here in Oklahoma. A couple things I want to start off with once we put my slides up there. But one thing I want to ask is, how many of you had to either help plan or help folks that responded to people that were affected by the 2017 and 18 hurricane seasons? Show of hands. I see some out there. Yes, unfortunately, the 2017-18 hurricane seasons were very devastating, and we will talk about that and some of the lessons learned. But first, I want to ask the question, when you see a hurricane like we see those up on the screen, what do you think about when that hurricane is approaching? Take a second, close your eyes, visualize what you think you see when that hurricane is approaching. So, did you think of wind? Yes? Everybody think of wind? That's what most people think about when a hurricane is approaching, is the wind. Of course, there is strong winds. I'll show later just how much devastation those winds caused during Michael of last year. But the thing that people often don't think about is the water. And so it's really the water that we have to start getting people to prepare for, think about. This is why we're asking people to evacuate from the shoreline, is because of storm surge, and then there's also the inland flooding aspect that is really taking lives during hurricanes. We've done a study at the Hurricane Center looking at deaths across the United States over about a 50-year period from 1963 to 2012. During that time, it's water. About 9 out of 10 deaths in hurricanes is from the water and not from the wind. So again, half of those deaths are being caused by storm surge. Again, storm surge is when that hurricane is pushing that water on shore, causing it to flood. So it's those folks that we really want to make sure are evacuating or getting out of harm's way before the hurricane is threatening. And then, of course, the last two hurricane seasons, we've seen, unfortunately, very devastating results from inland flooding. During Harvey and Harvey and Florence, we've seen this devastating impact from flooding. So again, it's water, not wind, that's killing folks. Unfortunately, the U.S. has been greatly affected over the past couple of seasons. We've actually had 12 tropical storms and hurricanes that affected the U.S. I'm going to walk us through those real significant storms that we've had: the Harvey, Irma, Maria, and then this past year, Florence and Maria, and talk a little bit about some of the messaging challenges that we faced at the hurricane season in getting people to take the right actions. And again, I think the parallel here between hurricanes and tornadoes is getting people to understand risk and also understanding what they need to do to prepare and then what actions they have to take when they're threatened. So hopefully I can do that here over the next few minutes. Starting out with some records and highlights. I wouldn't say maybe they're highlights, but lowlights of the 2017 hurricane season. It was an incredible season, not just in the U.S., but in the Caribbean. We ended up having 5 Category 5 landfalls across the basin last year, with 4 of those being from Irma in the Caribbean, and then also 1 by Maria in Puerto Rico. It became the costliest year on record in the U.S., with about $265 billion damage. And unfortunately, we had 3 of the top 5 most damaging hurricanes in the U.S., with Harvey being 2nd, Maria 3rd, and Irma being 5th. Also unfortunate, there were several hundred both direct and indirect fatalities. But one good thing I'll talk about in a minute is that we don't know of any storm surge-related fatalities. Remember I showed you the graph saying that most of the fatalities have been coming from storm surge? Well, maybe we're starting to at least turn the dial a little bit and getting people to understand that risk. And we have some new products at the Hurricane Center that we've developed over the last couple of years to help communicate that storm surge threat. So looking a little bit further at the 2017 season, again, $265 billion in damage. There were also those several hundred direct and indirect fatalities. Maria became the strongest hurricane to hit Puerto Rico in about 90 years when it made landfall on that island. You see the radar image of Maria in that bottom left-hand corner. You see it stops. It stops right there over Puerto Rico. The radar actually failed at that point when Maria made landfall, and it wasn't because of loss of communication. It was actually because the radar physically was blown to pieces by the force of the wind, especially where it was located on a hillside in Puerto Rico. And again, that radar was actually down for several months because of the storm. Moving ahead a little bit to this past hurricane season, another devastating season for the United States. A little bit less so from the Caribbean islands. They were not as impacted this year. We actually had a tropical storm that made landfall before the official start of the season. So the last few hurricane seasons, we've had some storms that have formed in May. Not too unusual for that to happen. But we saw that last season and had a tropical storm make landfall during Memorial Day weekend along the northern Gulf Coast. Thankfully, it wasn't extremely impactful. It did bring some rain and some flooding to portions of the central U.S. But then we ended up having another tropical storm make landfall along the northern Gulf Coast. And then again, the 2 storms that you're probably most familiar with. That was Florence, which produced, again, record-setting rainfall because of its slow motion across the Carolinas. And then Michael, that became very intense. In fact, it was the most intense hurricane to strike the Florida Panhandle on record. So here's a couple more figures about these 2 storms. Again, Florence produced more than 30 inches of rainfall in the Carolinas. Again, it set a state rainfall record. 2 years in a row, we've had state rainfall records broken. And it also became the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the United States since Hurricane Andrew back in 1992. And I'll show you a little bit more about that as we move forward in the presentation. One thing that was really fascinating for us, and this should play as a loop, I think, if you have to click, was we got some new tools to help forecasting starting in 2016. And that was some imagery from a new geostationary satellite. These satellites help us predict weather across the country, help with tornado forecasting, help winter weather forecasting, and they helped us make hurricane forecasts. This was from the GOES-16 satellite, and this is 1-minute imagery of when Harvey was approaching the coast, and Harvey was strengthening right up to when it made landfall along the coast of Texas. This imagery is helping us to be able to pinpoint where the center of the storm is located, especially when the storms are just forming, and we're trying to determine whether or not they have a closed circulation and whether they're starting to strengthen. So some imagery that we have at the Hurricane Center. Again, Harvey, a few other facts. I'll move now kind of into the individual storms, talking about some of those lessons learned from each storm. Harvey, unfortunately, was the deadliest hurricane in Texas since 1919. It really brought all 4 of the main hurricane hazards to the U.S. Again, we're talking storm surge. There was a significant storm surge near Rockport. Thankfully, that was a little north of the higher populated area of Corpus Christi. Its meandering track then brought this devastating rainfall. We also had the wind, and then there were also 57 tornadoes produced by the storm from Texas to Tennessee. So again, bringing all these various hazards. And it's each of these hazards that we have to focus on. So the Hurricane Center, we have learned the lesson to try to focus on each hazard. Not really the category of the storm, but we need to get people focusing on what the risk is and what the hazards. And we're now producing various products at the Hurricane Center to help do that. One of those being a new warning. I don't know how many folks have heard about this new warning, but for years, the Hurricane Center could not warn about storm surge. We didn't have a warning for it. It was covered by a hurricane warning, just in general, saying there's going to be wind, there's going to be water. But now we're issuing a new product called a Storm Surge Watch and Warning, which helps us to highlight the areas along the coast that we're most concerned about to getting life-threatening storm surge. It's another tool we hope for emergency managers to be able to use to say these are the areas that we're most concerned about and we need to get those people away from these locations. So it's a new warning that we started issuing. We hope this is what's helping to reduce the loss of life we've seen the last couple years from storm surge. But again, the first issuance was during Hurricane Harvey. Here's what those warnings mean. Just like with all National Weather Service warnings, it does have a definition, and these warnings also will go off on your cell phones. So they are alerted to folks that are in these areas. And again, that storm surge warning means that there's a danger of life-threatening inundation, or the seawater is going to flood these normally dry areas within about 36 hours. And then there's an associated watch that goes with that. So again, once Harvey made landfall, the winds decreased and the storm surge began to decrease, but it quickly transitioned into this flooding threat. This is where I think the Weather Service has helped to learn about messaging, and we use some very strong language in some of our products. We coordinated that with folks at the Weather Prediction Center. Greg Carbon is here. He's one of the folks, branch chief at the Weather Prediction Center, and his unit is what provides the Hurricane Center our rainfall forecast. It helps us to be able to stick to the track and intensity and the forecast for the storm, but then they can provide their expertise in these rainfall forecasts. And we were communicating or coordinating on wording so that we could be consistent, provide that consistent message from the Weather Prediction Center, from the Hurricane Center, and then down to our local National Weather Service offices that were the affected areas. So that, again, all about messaging, actionable information for folks. Again, Harvey, not only did it break state records, but it actually broke the U.S. record. More than 60 inches of rain was recorded at a rain gauge near Nederland, Texas, just very near Beaumont, which broke the record rainfall that was set back in Hawaii in 1950. Last year, I actually had a chance to go visit the rain gauge where that was recorded near Beaumont, and that's a picture I took of the gauge where they recorded that 60 inches. But again, just incredible amounts of rain cause flooding. We actually had a chance also to talk to some of the folks that were in that affected area about their experience. And again, we've got to get people thinking about water and what they need to do to prepare. These are the forecasts. The forecast for the rainfall has actually been pretty good also for the last couple years. So this graph showing you just how many inches we were forecasting of rain as we were leading up to the event. And again, these forecasts were coming from the Weather Prediction Center. Even before landfall, we were forecasting amounts of 40 inches of rainfall. And then shortly after landfall, the storm was slowing down. We actually increased those amounts to more than 50 inches. Just incredible, I think, to think that we can forecast that amount of rainfall in a tropical storm and do it accurately, because we did see these rainfall amounts occur. And again, I'll show a slide in a minute about how well those rains were forecast this year during Florence. Moving on to urban now, this will hit closer to home. Being from South Florida, not only do I have to forecast the storms, but I also have to live it and make those preparations myself. This was pretty stressful for us down in South Florida. It became a Category 5 hurricane, of course, in the Caribbean, made landfall in the Florida Keys as a Category 4 storm, and then made a second landfall in Southwest Florida at Category 3 strength. And there was significant damage in the Florida Keys, and then wind impacts across much of the state. Thankfully, where I'm at in Southeast Florida, a lot of tree damage and some minor structural damage, but I was not significantly impacted. But because of the risk to the Hurricane Center and to Miami, a couple of us, including myself, ended up going to our backup center at the Weather Prediction Center and providing some support in case the Hurricane Center had any issues, being able to communicate and issue its forecast. Here's that one of those track forecasts. How many people are familiar with the cone, even if you don't live it? Maybe you have seen the cone. I see a few hands. Some people call it the cone of death. Some people call it the cone of overtime. But it, again, it's a tool, just one tool in our toolbox to help communicate track, where the storm might be going. And here's a case about 5 days before it reached the Keys. We were forecasting it to be near the Keys. Actually, I think this is the forecast that I may have actually issued. There's where the storm actually made landfall. And you'll see a theme over the next few minutes with how well we did predict track over the last couple years. And that's a testament to the weather modeling, community weather observations that we're making, that we've seen this great improvement in track forecasting over time. But the problem with Florida was the track shifted. So they were focused on the Keys, and then they moved a little to the East Coast, and then they went back toward the West Coast. And it was difficult. It was just, at these long lead times, we have to realize that everyone was sort of at equal risk, although people were preparing and doing different actions because of what they perceived from this exact forecast track. And that was something that was a little tough for us to communicate, was to get people to realize whether you lived on the East Coast or West Coast 5 days out, the risk was just about equal, and really we all should have been doing at about the same things, preparing at this point. When I talk about storm surge, I'll go back to this because this was a case in which it shows you just how sensitive the hurricane track is to who's going to get storm surge. So on the left-hand part of the screen is a simulation that we ran after the storm occurred. This is what we think really happened. So you take the storm, it made landfall near Marco Island, Naples, Florida, moving northward. The forecast the night before was for it to stay just offshore. Had it taken that track on the right, we could have seen another couple hundred, 150,000 more people that might have been impacted by storm surge. And this just shows how sensitive storm surge is to the track of the storm. Again, small changes in track can make huge differences on who exactly sees the highest storm surge and the worst conditions. And because of that, well, this slide here, again, shows not only were the worst conditions there in Southwest Florida, but because Irma was so large, we were getting storm surge effects even on the east coast of Florida, again, because of the large size. But the Hurricane Center is issuing a product, not just the warning. The warning is kind of saying yes or no, am I in or am I out of the area that we're most concerned about? But this product is really geared more toward decision makers, and it's a product saying how high can the water reach? It's a probabilistic product, that's providing kind of the reasonable worst case scenario. And so this is a product that we're issuing, showing, again, how high the water could reach, and not just at the coast, but how far inland might it penetrate. Before we started issuing these maps, I think a lot of people thought that storm surge was just a coastal event. But storm surge can penetrate well inland, especially in areas like Florida or up rivers. And so this just shows folks living away from the coast what their potential is and helps those decision makers make preparedness actions. And what you see is the colors represent height above ground. So when you look at the little colors with the people, that's basically showing you how high to your body those waters could reach. And hopefully that's a way to also get people to realize that if I'm in those yellow areas, the water could almost reach the top of my head, and perhaps I need to leave. So again, just some new tools that we have to help communicate risk. One thing with Hurricane Irma, we also saw a very large number of what we call indirect fatalities. So these are the fatalities that are happening both before and after the storm, during the preparation phase and during the recovery phase. And we've done some studies as well that show over time, as forecasts have improved, we're seeing overall maybe less fatalities from storms. We're now seeing as many people die both before and after as during. And it's really something that I think we as a community have to start messaging, is to get people to realize what's killing people before and after. And it's things like heart attacks. As people are stressed and they're making preparations, they're putting hurricane shutters up, they're doing things they don't normally do. And then there's also a lot of factors from loss of electricity, from people carbon monoxide poisoning in generators, people going out and using chainsaws that normally don't use them. So we're seeing a lot of these type injuries and fatalities before and after. And we're trying, as a Weather Service, trying to start to message, getting people aware of these risks and make them understand perhaps they should get help from a neighbor or a friend if they're not familiar with using a chainsaw or putting up shutters, so that we can try to reduce these injuries and fatalities as well. But we're seeing a lot, and this also happened this hurricane season, we're seeing just as many deaths before and after as during. So moving quickly over into Maria, Maria brought all the hazards to Puerto Rico, just like Harvey brought them to Texas. We certainly saw wind, heavy rainfall and flooding, and storm surge damage in Puerto Rico. And again, just very devastating for the island. One thing about the Hurricane Center forecast here is they were pretty consistent. In fact, I don't know that 5-10 years ago, you would have seen as consistent forecast from the Hurricane Center as what you see here, that every single forecast we issued, starting about 3.5 days before Maria made landfall, that every single one of those forecasts showed the storm making landfall on the island of Puerto Rico, which isn't very big. But again, those track forecasts hopefully giving folks those lead times to be able to make some preparedness actions. Hurricane Florence, turning over into this year, again, this one was a very long-lived, what we call Cape Verde storm, formed well off the coast of Africa, tracked all the way across the Atlantic, plenty of time to watch it. And it reached Category 4 strength over the Atlantic. It weakened, making landfall as a Category 1 in North Carolina. But it's not just about the category. That's what we have to get people to think about. It is not about the category, it's about the hazards. And in Florence, it was all about water, both storm surge and both inland flooding. We at the Hurricane Center really tried to keep messaging on those hazards. In fact, when the storm started weakening, we were still focused on the hazards. Our headlines remain life-threatening storm surge and rainfall expected. I'll tell you one story. One night we were making sure that we were really staying focused on those hazards. We weren't talking about the fact that the storm just had weakened to Category 1. We punch out the forecast. 2 seconds later, my cell phone goes off, and it says, Florence downgraded. I was like, oh, we've got to get people to not think about the downgrades and the weakening. We got to keep people focused on hazards. And that's what we really, again, all of us have to do, I think, in the weather community, is to, again, keep people focused on those hazards. Florence was a difficult one to forecast as far as intensity. This was thankfully out when it was over the Atlantic. And I won't get too much, but the white line is what actually happened. The intensity goes up, gets stronger. And then all those little squigglies are the models that we have for forecasting intensity. It's kind of like these people see the spaghetti diagrams for track. This is kind of our spaghetti diagram for intensity. But you can see none of them forecasted Florence to rapidly strengthen. And that's an area that we still struggle, is forecasting intensity. Getting a little better, but not nearly, we haven't seen nearly the advancements with intensity forecasting as we have with track. Here's just another graph showing all of the Hurricane Center forecasts kind of in the same diagram, and you can see we missed that first period of rapid strengthening. We got the second one a little bit better, but then we forecast it to remain strong, and it ended up weakening as it made landfall, but again, didn't change those impacts very much. One thing we're doing in the Hurricane Center is experimenting with 6- and 7-day forecasts. So we started issuing 5-day forecasts in 2003, and with the advancements in models and better weather prediction, we're starting to look at whether we can go out further in time to a day 6 and 7. But I'll say a word of caution. While the average errors of those forecasts hasn't been too bad, about 300 or 400 nautical miles, but they're really big misses. And here's a few. For about 1 day, we would have predicted Florence to basically head toward the Atlantic Ocean, stay more out to sea, when it eventually became a threat to the U.S. So again, thinking about how we might message these 6- and 7-day forecasts. We're still having some of those internal discussions, but I think this is something that you will see from the Hurricane Center in a few years. Once Florence was a little further west, the track forecast became very consistent and very good. Again, the common theme is track forecasting has gotten much better with time. And with the rainfall forecast, again, just incredible work done by the Weather Prediction Center, Greg Carbon and his team. On the left was the 5-day rainfall forecast. On the right was the observed 5-day rainfall totals. Again, I think just a testament to weather prediction in general, that we're able to forecast and message these record-setting rainfall amounts. Greg's got a session later on today where he'll talk a little bit more, but one of the products they're issuing, and I'll plug for him now at the Weather Prediction Center, is called the Excessive Rainfall Outlook. And I hope you're looking at this like you look at the Storm Prediction Center outlook graphics, because these provide those risks of flash flooding and flooding. And so when you see these high-risk days, it means something. It means that you're in an area that has the potential for really life-threatening flooding, and Greg's going to talk more about that later today, but a product I hope you're looking at regularly. And now lastly, we'll talk about Michael for just a few minutes. Again, Michael was a storm that, again, the track forecast pretty good, but intensity forecasts, we really struggled, and I'll show you that. And it became, again, the strongest storm to make landfall in the U.S. since Andrew in 1992. One thing that's amazing is looking at not only the damage at the coast, but these strong winds also penetrated well inland. And I just made a couple comparisons. I moved to Miami about a year after Andrew and saw some of the damage that was still around in 1993. But you can look at the tree damage, and it really was very comparable. And again, high-end 4, we can argue whether it was a high-end 4 category 5. It's just a threshold, and we're talking just a couple miles an hour. But you can see that both storms produced just devastating wind damage as the storm moved inland. So we can't forget about the wind. I actually did a lot of the forecasts for Michael. I'll show you on the bottom right that we actually still keep a paper track map at the Hurricane Center. Despite all the technology, we still actually do track the storm, the significant storms on a paper map, looking at all the various aircraft locations and taking it across the Eastern Gulf. But again, the intensity forecasts were the challenge. This is that same plot showing all those intensity models. And this was about a day and a half before landfall, 2 days before landfall. We were forecasting. I made the forecast. I was the highest, went higher than all of my guidance. But look in the white, how much stronger Michael ended up becoming. It became nearly a high-end Category 4 hurricane. We were forecasting here at the time about a Category 3, so it did become stronger than forecast. But one good thing about our products is that we are accounting for this uncertainty in a lot of our products. So we have the storm surge products. They're accounting for stronger storms reaching the coast. And because of that, we were able to put out forecasts like this that were pretty accurate as far as what the storm surge could reach. So not only was that potential storm surge flood map up in the upper right-hand corner, but that we had other forecasts showing what those storm surge heights could be. And so despite forecasts which were for intensities a little bit lower than what made landfall, the messaging, I think, was there, and I was worried. Believe me, the day after it made landfall, I'm sitting there going, oh, goodness, what could we have done better? Did we do a good job? Did we message this event? I looked at the devastation and thought, hopefully people got out. But I did see, it was funny, I saw on Twitter a storm chaser had gone into the area, and they picked up a newspaper box. And this was the front page of the Tallahassee newspaper the day of landfall. So I looked at it and thought, I think they were getting the messaging. It did say the officials warned it could be the storm of the century. And it also said that life-threatening wind and surge was closing in. So again, I think we're seeing the messaging, but we also have to get to the human side because I think there are impediments to people evacuating. Some of it's financial, some of it's having pets, some of it's other things, but we all collectively have to try to overcome that and convince people to do the right thing, especially when we have a storm like this that's bearing down on them. Again, those forecasts were very consistent. Again, track forecasts were pretty good. People certainly knew that a big storm was approaching. This, to me, just shows, again, how much the science has evolved. This goes back, I took the average forecast track here in 1992, Andrew, the last time we had a storm this strong make landfall. A 3-day forecast. Back then, if we paid a forecast for that point in yellow, that storm could have made landfall anywhere within that circle, or been anywhere within that circle in 3 days. That was the average Hurricane Center track error in 1992. That's what it is today. Just much, much lower. Again, we've reduced that track error, gotten better. But what does that mean? It meant our products like our cone graphic that shows that track. I always say the cone's been on a diet. The cone's gotten smaller. But storm size hasn't changed. We're still seeing the Irmas, the Michaels that are big. And so there's a lot more impacts occurring outside the zone, or outside the cone, and that's been something that we've had difficulty in messaging. And then we hear various things like this. I won't leave this up too long, but again, it gets into the same things that I've been mentioning. We hear a lot of people get focused on category. People get focused on what the intensity is now versus what it's forecast to be. People look at model guidance and think they're making decisions based on that. And so again, these are all the things that we have tried to now message better at the Hurricane Center with some of the products I showed you, as well as using social media and things like key messages. We started making these key message graphics after Hurricane Joaquin. There was a lot of uncertainty in the forecast a few years ago. Very, very well received, especially by media, emergency managers. We're all talking the same thing. It's really the key things that we want folks to be taking away from that forecast. And so we're issuing products like that, the key messages. And we're also doing things like Facebook Live. Our director, Mr. Ken Graham, has done, we do Facebook Lives when there's a storm threatening. And again, I think it's another way to help us get these messages out. Again, we're trying to focus on the hazards, impacts, not category. Here's a tweet, again, from Florence, the same time I mentioned, where we're talking about what the impacts are going to be. Got to keep focus on impacts. And just a few things here. Again, got to get people to remember that every storm is different. You can't compare what happened last time versus this one. Different landfall location, different size, different intensity. It's going to cause different flooding at your location. Got to remain focused on the water and wind hazards. We have these new probabilistic products to help. And again, getting people to realize that these impacts can occur way outside the cone. And one of the most important things is make sure people are sharing reliable information from reliable sources so that, again, we stay focused on actionable and reliable information. One thing with the Hurricane Center, you know, we're lucky that we actually have, and I know there's a lot of severe weather awareness weeks, we have a whole week that's a national week geared toward National Hurricane Preparedness Week. And, you know, we really strive to make it actionable. We used to talk about, you know, forecasts and talk about the hazards, but now we've made it where it's an actionable week. What do we want you to do every day of the week? So Sunday is the first thing, determine your risk. What is your risk? Do you need to evacuate from the storm? If you do, Monday's the day that you develop your evacuation plan. And then we move into Tuesday, where we want you to now assemble that plan. Wednesday is to make sure people have insurance. This was one we added a few years ago. We want to make sure people are getting their insurance. They have a checkup with your agent to make sure you are covered. And then it gets into strengthening your home. You know, what are some simple things that you can do to make your home stronger? And then it's also helping each other. Again, I talked about the number of fatalities before and after. Let's make sure we're helping each other. And then Saturday is really to write it down, have the plan. And so we're doing this, so we'll have this again coming up the week of May 6th this year. We also have our Hurricane Awareness Tour, where we go on some of the aircraft that fly into hurricanes to various cities. This year will be along the east coast of the United States and talk about these things. And lastly, we are trying to also get people to make sure they get the right insurance. We actually we have a blog at the Hurricane Center where we occasionally write various articles, and last year we wrote one talking about why people need to get insurance and help us. You know, a lot of people may live just outside that 100-year flood zone and aren't buying flood insurance. I actually live on a lake in South Florida where I'm not required to have flood insurance, but I have it. When I look out my backyard and I see the water, it's too close to me. I know that we can get 20, 30, 40 inches of rain sometime. And so I have flood insurance. And so, again, we are trying to help get the message out, you know, folks to make sure they have that as well. And again, in the end, you know, Weather Service, it's a weather-ready nation. We're trying to again, move the dial, to get away from people just ending up in the bad, but preparing for, you know, making sure the forecasts are then being able to help with critical emergency management decisions, personal preparedness decisions, making sure people, you know, can be ready. And I think that's, again, where the parallel is with the tornadoes, is to make sure the messaging is there for people to have actionable information to get ready for these natural disasters. And that, again, I just kind of end, you know, help us to do that as well, help promote it. We're all in this together. You know, we can't do it without you all, both media, insurance folks, anybody that's in, you know, making sure people are prepared. It's a team effort, and so I thank you for helping us with that. And hopefully you found some of this interesting about the 2017-18 hurricane seasons. Thank you.
Time before our next speaker comes up and adds to this. And so we've been reading the Slido questions, so I'm going to ask one of the more popular questions. You talked about the messaging. This delves into that a little bit more. What are the best ways to reach residents before, during, and after a hurricane? And do they change in each of those stages?
So, I mean, I think it's a combination. A lot of the research has shown that people really need to get messages multiple ways, and they want some kind of confirmation of the event that's coming. But this day and age, people are still relying on television. You know, television media is still huge as far as getting the message, and we couldn't do our job without them. That's why we're, you know, they're in the building with us when we have a storm. So it is that, but I do think social media is taking a bigger and bigger role, and that's why we're trying to do more with Facebook Live. Again, making sure we're sending out pertinent information, because the media grabs that messages too. So if you're an emergency manager, you're in the insurance field, look for our, you know, Hurricane Center and trusted sources and help us to still send out those preparedness messages, facts, and so forth. Yep. Thank you.
So let's thank Daniel. That's great information. And so again, we're going to continue on with this. We're going to hear more about lessons learned from surviving hurricanes. Our next speaker is President and CEO of the Insurance Information Institute. Before joining the Insurance Information Institute, he was Group Head of Public Affairs for Zurich Insurance Group, where he oversaw government and industry affairs as well as corporate responsibility. As a political appointee in the administration of President George W. Bush, he served in the Department of Treasury as a spokesperson for economic issues and eventually became senior advisor for the Office of Tax Policy. He was also the press secretary for the White House Office of Management and Budget. He advised numerous multinational and Fortune 100 corporate clients on policy issue management programs, corporate reputation campaigns, and crisis communications. So please join me in welcoming Sean Kevlin.
Everyone, good to be back out west. I actually was raised in Colorado, and I'm heading there actually after this. So nice to be out west. I was expecting it to be a little bit warmer, but still good stuff. What I wanted to talk to you all about today is really about insurance and what insurance is. But also, this event is one of the best events in terms of catastrophe awareness every year. So it was really an honor to get to be here. It was also an opportunity to repay a favor. 2017, I had the honor of testifying with former Commissioner Doak before the Senate Subcommittee on Insurance. And we're up there, the committee, the focus of the hearing is on fraud. So I get my notes all ready about how insurance and technology and we're using to combat fraud. Senator from Connecticut decides to call me the fraudster, insurance. Going back to an issue that he was having in the state about homes and crumbling foundations, and I explained to him it's a tragic issue, but it's not a personal insurance issue, it's more of a commercial insurance issue. Senator says, Commissioner Doak, doesn't this make your blood boil? Commissioner Doak says, well, I actually think he's right. So this is me repaying that favor when you said you got to get yourself down to our National Tornado Summit, because I was bound to be down here for that one. What the Insurance Information Institute is it's a 60-year-old organization that was founded by the industry, the carriers, in fact. And what we wanted to do was help people better understand what insurance is, how it works. We want to be and are a top go-to source for objective research and information. Objective, so we don't actually sell insurance on our content. We just provide content to help people better understand it. We also don't lobby, because we're just trying to be objective and provide objective information. We're headquartered in New York, which is the backdrop of that slide, but that backdrop is also a great illustration of the power of what insurance is. After 9/11, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about terrorism in this event later, but after 9/11 happened, that virtually every insurance claim was paid. From pet insurance to workers' comp to auto, you name it, it was all paid out. But the industry couldn't write terrorism and couldn't predict it anymore. And so they had to withdraw from markets. And as a result, the construction and real estate industries in New York, one of the largest industries in the world, shut down. It had to take an act of Congress, the Terrorism Reinsurance Act, an authorization that, since it's up for reauthorization again here in 2020, it took that act of Congress to actually get the economy in New York back up and running. And that's the power of insurance, and that's what we at the Insurance Information Institute want people to understand. You all provide a very powerful part of our economy, and you're working hard to make sure that we have a strong economic growth and that we're actually saving lives and rebuilding communities. One thing we also do in terms of educating the public is we handle thousands of media inquiries. We heard earlier from Daniel about people wanting to know in the press and what's going on and how that's happening. They oftentimes come to us to get the explanation. This breaks down the insurance coverage of late. What you're seeing here is we took out all the insurance earnings information. We just focused on the issues. Big issue there that's happening in insurance, about 30% on technology and cyber going on and what's happening. But then that orange area is really a lot of what we're talking about at this conference, right? 30% of what we see in media coverage is focused on natural catastrophe risks. What we then did is we said, okay, that's interesting that what's being covered. But also, and we heard earlier again, the power of social media is becoming much, much more of a tool and a force, right? And so we looked at that media coverage and we then combined it with what the social share was. So as much as the InsurTech was 30%, and you see it was, in fact, InsurTech was the most published topic on the industry. But what was the most shared? NFIP, floods, homeowners insurance as well. Natural catastrophe risks are oftentimes what happens in homeowners insurance. So people very much care about this and want to know more about it. And so we need to also educate, and I was so glad to hear about things like key messages and how we need to better prepare and mitigate things. There are a variety of issues that happen around the insurance industry, and so we try and map them out in terms of what issues need to be informed or elevated or owned by us that we really need to be paying attention to. And it rises to the top, and we break this out by what's the opportunity or risk in the communities and to the industry versus what's the public discussion level. And natural catastrophe resilience is the issue. It's the issue that we're focused on at the III. We have other issues that we're trying to work on. In fact, insurance as economic capital is widely underappreciated for our industry. Probably most of you don't even know that we actually, as an industry in insurance, surpassed banking in terms of our contribution to GDP. We are a very powerful economic force. We weathered the financial crisis, but most people don't understand that. But I'll go on and get back into the natural catastrophe resilience. But also, one of the things in terms of catastrophes that we have to understand is there are a lot of other disruptive forces out there, right? In fact, the World Economic Forum puts out their annual risk report, and natural catastrophes, believe it or not, didn't even make the top 10 in terms of rising risks in 2019. Interesting that economics was number one, right? We've had a long, slow ride in growth, and our fundamentals are strong in terms of economics in the US right now. In fact, at our annual meeting, Federal Reserve Commissioner Randy Quarles said 2019 looks good, but at the same time, we're seeing a lot of trepidation out there, economics, and so in our industry is tied hand in hand with the economy. So 2019 looks good. 2020, there's still a bit of a question mark of what's going on, and the reason why there's still a question mark is the geopolitical volatility that's out there is quite amazing right now. We've got our own bashing and challenges and gridlock in DC and other areas that are happening, but if you look out at India and Pakistan and the Middle East and China, there's a ton of economic challenges that are happening that are impacting the economy, right? And then layering in, we've got technology. And technology right now, they're saying, is at the forefront of the fourth industrial revolution. So lots of disruptive forces out there. But in the insurance industry, I think we all need to appreciate this is what we do and have been doing for more than 3 centuries, right? Way back to when Lloyd's and the coffee house was trying to gain more information around the disruption that was occurring in the shipping industry. And then if you go through all the other industrial revolutions, steam and machinery, mass production, electronics and IT and automation, all of these things, what did they have in common? In order to innovate, they needed to transfer the risk. In order to make this all happen, they needed insurance, right? And so we could argue that insurance disruption is what we do. And this is a fascinating time, and we're just seeing some of the new and latest technologies that were coming out of NOAA, where we're beginning to see this cyber and physical space come together, right? This is how insurance has been leading through disruption for over 300 years. What's going to be interesting for this industry and for all of you is that we're all going to be disrupted this time, right? This innovation is going to challenge all of us. But I also argue it's going to promote resilience, and it's going to mitigate risks, and we're going to protect ourselves and protect our customers and protect our communities. Insurers are vanguards of resilience, right? We have been mitigating risks for over 300 years. None of us want the claim to happen. The customer doesn't want the claim to happen. The insurer doesn't want the claim to happen. Nobody wants that to happen, so we've got to think about things in terms of resilience more and more, because the fact is that catastrophes are increasing in frequency and severity across the board. That's just a fact, and we can't do it. We need to understand that it's happening, and it's happening more and more. We heard that the surge is getting more and more unpredictable, right? So you look at these images, and you probably can recognize some of these, right? You've got, actually the one on top there is from Sandy in Long Island. The one on the bottom is from Louisiana after Katrina. So what do they have in common? It wasn't the first time, right? Over here on the top, on the right-hand side, that's from the Long Island Express in 1938. Hurricane went through, went up into New England. Great Mississippi Flood of 1927, right? And so you see that we've got a lot of things. It wasn't the first time. We need to understand that if we don't learn from the past, we're condemned to repeat it, right? This is where insurance is going. This is what we need to focus on. We need to understand that we need to learn from the past. And we heard earlier about what's happening in extreme events. You're looking here at just a list of the top 10. You see 3 of the top 10 happened in 2017. 8 of the top 10 were hurricanes. Hurricanes are a major threat. I was really surprised to see that this is a global study that Aon puts out in their annual report. Tropical cyclones here you're seeing surpass flooding. Now we know that tropical cyclones lead to flooding in a lot of ways, but if you look at half of that chart, you're seeing tropical cyclones and flooding as major catastrophes. We need to learn and we need to educate and we need to analyze what's going on, because the fact is we've got, in 10 years, we've suffered more than $1 trillion globally in terms of uninsured losses, right? This is one of the problems. People need insurance. So what we're doing right now is helping do just that. At the III, but also as an industry, we're trying to make people understand that the industry is working on solutions to the change that's going on. We don't need to engage in what's in many ways just a political discussion about how and why. We need to focus on what we do. We focus on the solutions. We focus on the mitigation. So we'll be putting out some information about how the industry is actually working to actually look at solutions to the changes that are going on. The Society of Actuaries are creating a climate index. The Institute for Business and Home Safety, what great resources there, studying how we can improve our building standards. Because as devastating as Andrew was, it taught us a lot of lessons, and we got to get new building standards into the state of Florida, which you could argue is a difference between Harvey and Irma in 2017 in terms of building codes, where Houston had relatively little, almost no building codes in place. We're also at the III beginning to create a resilience index, measuring communities so that we can educate them on where they need to look at ways to mitigate their risks, where they need to build things more and become more resilient. And we're working with Aon, who's helping us with the forecasting as well and the information so that we can understand when and how the risks are coming. And then one of the other things that the industry is doing, this is one of our member companies, Lloyd's. They're going in and looking and trying to build future cities to prevent failure, expedite recovery, and transform performance. This is what the industry does and is focused on. We are focused on making our communities more resilient. We want to mitigate that risk so that even whatever the forecast is, whatever the surge is, our communities should be able to withstand it. So what I wanted to just share with you at the end is something you probably don't think about all the time, but thinking about a world without insurance.
Most folks know insurance is the thing that pays to repair damages to homes and cars. But if people stop to think about what insurance means to today's economy, they'd realize that insurers and the nearly 3 million people they employ nationwide make possible projects of all sizes. From airports, to stadiums and arenas, to coffee shops, to local childhood literacy programs. So to comprehend the many ways insurance makes the economy better and stronger, try to imagine a world without insurance. So what would that look like? For starters, hazards like natural catastrophes and motor vehicle accidents would result in far greater losses of life and property. However, through insurance's support for the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, and other organizations, homes are safer and more resilient, and motor vehicle deaths have plummeted to a fraction of what they were before 1960. Insurers also collect and analyze data and study ways to make the public more aware of the negative effects of distracted driving and to rate community preparedness. Without insurance, driving to work or having goods delivered to homes and businesses would be a lot riskier and potentially cost more for tens of millions of Americans. Also, workers might not be covered for injuries and illness that happen on the job, which would result in lost wages and financial disruption for families everywhere. But because insurance studies risks and compiles statistics to share with local, state, and federal governments, as well as private institutions, we have policies and laws in nearly every state requiring motorists to have some form of coverage. And all 50 states have workers' compensation laws.
3, 2, 1.
And without insurance, innovation might slow to a crawl, or perhaps not happen. The insurance industry as we know it was built to empower risk-takers who have created our modern economy. For more than 300 years since the Enlightenment and age of exploration, insurance has been the driving force that has underwritten investments in transformational technologies. From steam power, to mass production, to aviation, to automation and information networks, to future advancements in artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and big data. But perhaps insurance's biggest and most often overlooked contribution to economic growth is its key role as a major source of funding for projects large and small. This capital is vital to paying long-term claims, so insurers' investment portfolios often include private and municipal bonds that help finance the growth and prosperity of communities everywhere.
Right after tragedy, you need help. And that's what insurance is there for. We act as the financial first responder after catastrophe. We get into the communities, we help rebuild and restore people's lives and the economy more broadly. We act as a partner to governments and households and businesses, and we help them understand what the risks are, help them mitigate the risks, and in turn they will become more resilient and sustainable for the future.
A world without insurance? It's pretty safe to say that life would be a lot different and probably not as exciting. And this is why insurance is honored to play a part in making our economy more robust and resilient every day of the year.
Thank you all for your time. I encourage you to visit our website, and if you'd like to become members of the III, many of you are. In fact, Farmers is a proud member, I know, so come and visit us. Thank you.
Ask Daniel to come up as well. We do have a few questions we're going to ask you. Hopefully I can read them up here. So, Sean, I'm going to throw this one at you. Don't hurt me. It's a little tricky, but I think you can handle it. I've warned him. So with FEMA basing IA decisions on uninsured losses, why is there not a push for information sharing between emergency management and the insurance industry?
Well, it's funny. We actually have a very strong relationship now with FEMA. In fact, Dan Kanuski, who's the Associate Director and focuses on resilience, he and I have been working hand in hand. And one of the FEMA's primary messages, and we heard from Daniel as well, is resilience is the first step in, insurance is the first step in resilience. So we're working very closely with them. We're actually looking at even making a more formal partnership, because you're absolutely right. We need to educate it. The government-run flood insurance program needs more awareness. And just because of how the program is, the awareness isn't there. If you could imagine a world where we could market flood insurance like we market auto and home insurance, those have 90% take-up rates, or nearly 90%. The flood insurance has 12% take-up rate. All right, so we need to work with FEMA, and we are working with FEMA to make sure that we're getting people better educated about what they need.
Great, good. All right. Well, Daniel, your turn. So, let's see. I'm looking for the one I had found. Okay, so how often are the coastlines assessed when you're modeling storm surge? Because catastrophic storms change the coastline and change the risk. So what is that process?
So the storm surge modeling is updated fairly frequently. So we have different basins that we run our modeling through. And when we get new elevation information, then those models are updated. I would say they're updated on about every 5 to 7 year time period in which those models are updated. It's not, again, not every year. There's different basins that cover different portions of the coastline, and as we get new information, then those are done. A basin that's very sensitive, like around the New Orleans, southeast Louisiana, that one's updated like a little bit more frequently. So.
Very good, all right. So, Sean, you talked about the flood insurance. So what are things that not only insurance industry, but emergency management, builders, all of us folks, what can we do as a group here to do a better job of really educating people about flood insurance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, most people believe that it is part, one of the big challenges we face at III is when it's coming in, most people believe it's part of their homeowners. It's also a challenge to get it. If you've tried to get, Daniel mentioned that he got insurance, oftentimes it's hard to get. There isn't an incentive there. What we are seeing through FEMA and their desire is actually getting private industry more involved in the market itself. So right now they're getting involved through reinsurance and catastrophe bond purchasing. I think what we want to see though, and I believe FEMA wants this as well, is more private industry. In the 60s when this program came about, we couldn't understand the risk as much as we do now. The modeling that we're talking about is with geospatial mapping and new technologies is taking off. And so the 5 to 7 year lag time is going to quickly close, and we'll be able to hopefully get this insurance into the private market more.
Great, that'll be great. All right, one last quick question, Daniel, and that is, how do you help people figure out that storm surge and when they evacuate, where do they evacuate to? What's that process?
So that's a great question. Essentially, the emergency managers are making those evacuation calls. We get to stick to the meteorology, and they're making those tough decisions, which we're helping to support, and I think our new mapping is really helping. Not only do we have the real-time products at the Hurricane Center, but we also have products that we issue that look at just risk mapping in general for storm surge. And so those are available year-round, and those are what drives the nation's evacuation zones for hurricanes. And then, again, when the storm is threatening, they're using a combination of the real-time products, those products, and then it's a challenge to get people to take the action. I think more and more people are, but people don't have to go. And in Sally thought, you don't have to drive to Orlando. Thankfully, I met someone yesterday when I was getting on the plane. She saw my Hurricane Center shirt, and we started talking. And she said, "Yeah, I live in Hollywood in a Category 1 hurricane zone where I have to evacuate for basically every storm. But I have friends that live in Plantation, which is a 20-mile drive inland away from that risk zone, and that's where she goes. And that's all we have to do. We have to get the people away from the storm surge zones just to a place a few miles inland. We don't need to be driving hundreds of miles."
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much, both of you. Let's get a round of applause for our two great speakers. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. All right. So before I send you out, we do have a few announcements. I'll make them brief. Our first breakout session will begin promptly at 9:50 a.m. You have 5 different tracks to choose from. There's Adjuster, Disaster Special Interest, Emergency Management, National Severe Weather Workshop, and Risk Management. So for your information, again, a complete schedule is listed in your program and also on the app. And again, your program is in the back of your badge holder. Please be sure you're getting your name badges scanned by the volunteers at the door before each general and breakout session. Even if you're not wanting CE, we do want to scan your name badges, so please accommodate us for that, please. You are required, if you do want CE, to stay through the entire session in order to get that. And then after the first breakout session, or actually right now before you go to your breakout, please take time to visit with the exhibitors located throughout the second floor. They love to see you, they love to visit with you, and of course we want to thank them for their support of this event. So please do visit with the exhibitors. Enjoy the rest of your morning, and we will see you back here for lunch. Thank you.